The Outfit is a 2022 crime drama directed by first-time director Graham Moore, starring Mark Rylance, Zoey Deutch, Dylan O'Brien, Johnny Flynn and Simon Russell Beale. The film's events take place in one location, Rylance's tailor shop, in 1950s Chicago. When you don't call him a tailor, be sure to address him as a cutter, otherwise he'll launch into a long-winded monologue correcting your grievous error. Anyway, the basic premise is that Rylance is a man who is completely dedicated to his craft. I was reminded of Daniel Day-Lewis in Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread, with many scenes dedicated to Rylance doing his thing, cutting, sewing, measuring and the like. He has a young female assistant who dreams of escaping Chicago and travelling the world. The store is used by the mob as a drop-off and pick-up point for envelopes, the contents of which Mark Rylance wisely does not inquire about. One night, two gangsters, regular customers of his, knock on the door, one of them injured from a gunshot wound, seeking refuge from the cops and rival gangsters, and who suspect they have a rat in their crew, which kickstarts a series of events throughout the night in which the cutter must use his intellect and wit to outsmart the mobsters and survive the night. Aside from a couple of extras used as customers early on in the film, the movie only really has about a dozen actors, if that. It has a stage play quality to it, and it's one of those movies that has numerous twists and turns in the plot which keeps you guessing until the very end. The film will establish a certain conflict, like for example, the gangsters forcing the cutter at gunpoint to help heal the gunshot wound, with Rylance doing his best to comply and stay out of trouble. The movie will then throw a spanner into the works to complicate things, whether it be the phone ringing, or adding characters like one of the gangsters' father, who is a big-time boss, arriving at the store looking for his son. And our protagonist goes from trying to stay out of things to possibly manipulating events to turn all the vicious gangsters against each other so that he might come out of the night unscathed. The Outfit is an enjoyable film. For much of the runtime, it kind of felt like an episode of Boardwalk Empire, and not just because of the mob, the costumes, and the Chicago setting, but the way it looked and the way it was shot. But then about halfway through, it would be appropriate to say that the movie shares more in common with films like, say, The Usual Suspects or Identity, with the constant twists and turns. At times it's slow and feels a bit dry and mouldy. Like, I'm not sure why I needed to see the protagonist make tea, perform some measurements, take a sip from his cup, make some more measurements. You get the drill. But for sure, once the movie gets going, it's an entertaining ride. I liked it, and the best way to watch it is probably know that it's confined to a single setting going in and nothing much more. And once you've seen it, just put it out of your mind, because the more you think about it, the less it starts to make sense, and the more convoluted it appears to be. You see, unfortunately, The Outfit tries to be too clever for its own good. It values shock factor, the constant desire to come up with a new twist, over plausibility. It's like the filmmakers were too busy trying to wow the audience without stopping to contemplate whether the latest twist makes any sense within the context of the story or the character motivations. It's very convoluted. Without going into spoilers, the characters are all playing chess with each other. In some regard, it feels like those old murder mystery movies where everyone sits in the front room of a tall, dark house trying to point fingers at who the murderer is. There are backstabbings, double crossings, and power plays, characters playing 4D chess, but it doesn't really work. There's too many factors and events that occur outside of characters' control for them to be some kind of secret mastermind pulling the strings. But the film just keeps going with the twist. You think it's going to finish, and then it adds another twist, and then another, and very few of them actually recontextualize the film you've just watched and make an impact. Rather, they leave you thinking, that doesn't quite make sense. In fact, without going into spoilers, I would argue that the final twist actually damages the film and nullifies some of its best aspects. There were some points where it seemed the movie was actually embracing its absurdity, with characters referencing the incredulousness of the situations they found themselves in, but for the most part it does play it straight, which makes some of the more far-fetched and incomprehensible elements a little difficult to swallow. Still, the movie is enjoyable as a one-time viewing, and if you aren't as anal as me when it comes to analysing probabilities and possibilities when it comes to the script, I imagine you'll have some fun with the film. I give it a 6.5 out of 10.